You know how people like to use the Bible to say God created man and woman, and that makes it super clear that there's only two choices, man or woman. It just makes sense to do this video outside because we're in creation and we're talking about creation today. And you're probably already familiar with lots of the words that I'm going to share today. Remember how in the beginning there was nothing, and God breathed into the nothingness, and then there was light and there was dark. And then there was day and there was night, and God continues in this cycle of 6 days creating all of the things that we know. Well, this is a beautiful piece of poetry, and lots of us know it very well. And it's right there in Genesis 1:27 where we see, and God said, "Let us create them in our image, man and woman, he created them both." It says very clearly, man and woman. That means there can only be man and woman, right? Except we just got done saying that God created light and dark. And does that mean that light and dark are the only two choices? I mean, we know that that's not true. No, there's this whole range of light and dark. And then when the poem describes God creating light and dark, we're looking at both sides of a spectrum. And then day and night, God creates them. But it's not like we've got daytime, blink, nighttime. No, there's this beautiful broad spectrum of everything in between. And once we start to look at this piece of scripture this way, we see that this comes up all over the place. God creates all vegetation, trees and things that have seeds. Well, that's all that gets named in Genesis, but of course there's so many different things. I'm sure that that also included stuff like algae and fungi. Of course they don't get named. We know that those aren't plants, but those are all included, and we know that is included there. And then we get the birds of the air. Well, what about penguins? They're birds in the sea, but we know that those are included. And then we get all of the things that swim in the sea. Well, what all does that include or not? We know that this is describing great big boundaries. So when we get to man and woman, why do we shut down this idea of a spectrum and say, nope, all of the other times in this very scripture, each time it named either end of a spectrum, it meant everything in between. But now, man and woman can only be the binary. Do you see how even in the literary beauty of this scripture, we're really doing a disservice to limit it to man and only woman? And certainly, this scripture gets trotted out as a weapon against trans people and intersex and non-binary and fluid, but I think it does even more damage than that. Let's say there was only one description ever for men. That has to do with watching football and drinking beer and going out on the weekends and shooting things or maybe fishing. There are almost none of those things where I particularly enjoy, but I'm male. So you can see how every time we try and say that male-female is a very strictly defined binary, we're doing a disservice to you and me as well. Everybody in humanity is a little bit harmed by this idea. So let's instead see the beauty of light to dark and everything in between, day and night and everything in between, male and female and everything in between. I think that's a much better description of the beauty and creativity and diversity that God creates when we read this poem that starts in the beginning. I love you all. Happy Pride. Bye for now.